Carl Jung discovered something disturbing. What you most desire may be exactly what prevents you from healing. He was talking about pleasure, and today you will understand why. Imagine there is a perfect drug, a substance so refined that it doesn't need to be injected, snorted, or swallowed. It is absorbed through your eyes, your ears, your fingertips. And most impressive of all, you consume it willingly, paying for it, defending your right to use it, believing it makes you free. This drug isn't on the streets. It's on your bedside table, in your pocket, in your fridge, on your screen. And its effect is so subtle that you don't even realize you're addicted until you try to quit. Here's the contradiction that will unsettle you. You live in an age of infinite pleasure, but you've never felt so empty. You have access to more entertainment, more food, more sexual stimuli, more conveniences than any generation in human history. And yet, rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide are skyrocketing every year. Why? Because we've confused pleasure with happiness. We've confused relief with healing. We've confused anesthesia with life. Now answer me honestly. When was the last time you were completely alone, without music, without a screen, with nothing to do, for more than 10 minutes? When was the last time you felt bored and simply stayed with it? Most people can't remember. And it's not because they're too busy. It's because they've been conditioned to believe that any emotional discomfort is an emergency that needs to be resolved immediately. What you call feeling good may be exactly what is keeping you sick. And it's not your fault. It's design. Your brain has been hacked using your own needs against you. The same neurological circuits that were supposed to ensure your survival now ensure your dependence. Think about it. Do you know anyone who can watch a movie without checking their phone? Anyone who eats a meal without distraction? Anyone who can just sit and exist without needing to do something? Yes, the answer is probably no. And that's no coincidence. Jung warned about this decades ago, but no one imagined that one day it would become the basis of an entire economy. An economy that profits from your inability to be quiet, to tolerate boredom, to feel without escaping. An economy where your anxiety becomes profit, your loneliness becomes an audience, your emptiness becomes a consumer market. Today you will discover why every time you seek pleasure to escape pain, you are actually feeding it. And more importantly, how this has been taught to you since childhood, shaping every automatic response you have today. You will discover why your generation is the first in history to have unlimited access to pleasure and yet live in constant dissatisfaction. Why the more entertainment options arise, the more bored you become. Why the more digitally connected you are, the more alone you feel. The answer lies in the most primitive circuits of your brain and how they have been hijacked by those who understand exactly how they work. But first, I need to show you when exactly you were programmed to never again be able to be alone with your own thoughts. You were 5 years old when it first happened. You were crying. Maybe because you hurt. Maybe because you were scared. Maybe just because something inside you hurt in a way you couldn't yet name. And then someone came along with the solution. Stop crying. Look here. It was a cartoon, a piece of candy, a toy. Anything that would make the noise inside your head stop. It worked. The crying stopped. The discomfort disappeared. And your brain took note. Pain. Plus. Distraction. Duress. Relief. You didn't know it. But in that moment, you had just learned the language that would govern the rest of your life. A language where every difficult emotion has a translation into pleasure, where every void has a product to fill it, where every silence needs to be broken. Neuroscience today confirms what Jung intuited. Your brain does not distinguish between relief and happiness. For it, stopping suffering is the same as being well. And there lies the first hack. See, your nervous system evolved over millions of years with one simple goal: to keep you alive. Pain meant danger. Pleasure meant safety. If something hurt you, you ran away. If something gave you pleasure, you repeated it. But here's the problem. Your hunter-gatherer brain is trying to navigate a world that artificially produces both pain and pleasure. A world where you can feel the stress of a predator, your boss yelling at you, followed by the relief of a reward. Chocolate, likes, pornography, without leaving your chair. And every time this happens, the circuits get stronger. Every time you feel anxious and pick up your phone, you are teaching your brain that anxiety, runner danger. Ranks need dopamine now. Every time you feel lonely and turn on a TV show, you are reinforcing that loneliness. Runner threat. Runner need immediate stimulation. It's not self-control you've lost. It's neurological autonomy. Now think about it. How many times today have you felt discomfort and automatically sought something to alleviate it? How many times have you picked up your phone without even remembering why? How many times have you eaten when you weren't hungry, scrolled through your phone without interest, bought something you didn't need? Each of those times, you weren't choosing pleasure. You were obeying a conditioning so deep that it seems natural. And what's most disturbing, this was no accident. It was intentional design. Because at some point in history, someone realized that children who learn early to associate emotional discomfort with consumption become ideal adults for an economy based on selling temporary relief. Think about your childhood again. How many times did you hear, "Stop crying and eat that cookie"? "Stop throwing a tantrum or I'll turn off the tablet." "If you behave yourself, I'll buy you that toy." Each of these phrases was a lesson in neural programming. Emotions are problems, products are solutions. And it worked so well that today you don't even question it. Are you sad? Netflix. Are you anxious? Delivery. Are you bored? Instagram. Are you lonely? Tinder. You have been conditioned to believe that feeling is dangerous, and that the cure for any feeling is not to feel it. But here's the truth that no one tells you. Every time you interrupt emotional discomfort with artificial pleasure, you miss an opportunity to discover what that emotion was trying to teach you. Every time you run away from your own company, you become a little stranger to yourself. Jung called this neurosis, not the pain itself, but our refusal to confront it. And today, neurosis is no longer an individual deviation. It's the social norm. Because a society of people who can't sit in silence for 5 minutes without seeking stimulation is a society of perfect consumers. Predictable, controllable, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. What you haven't seen yet is how this childhood programming has been amplified exponentially in the digital age, turning everyone into functional addicts without even realizing it. And that's what we need to talk about now. What you're about to discover will forever change the way you see your own willpower. For millions of years, your brain evolved for a simple world. If something was sweet, it meant quick energy to survive. If something was new, it meant a possible opportunity or threat. If something gave you pleasure, it meant it was worth repeating. These rules worked perfectly, until someone figured out how to hack every single one of them. Think about sugar. In nature, sweetness was rare. A ripe fruit here, wild honey there. Your brain developed an insatiable craving for sweetness because finding it meant survival. Today, you can consume more sugar in a soda than your ancestors found in months. Your brain still acts like it's in the Paleolithic era, desperate for every ounce of glucose, not understanding that it now lives in a world where scarcity has become artificial abundance. But sugar was just the first hack. The real masterstroke came when they figured out how to manufacture novelty. You see, your primitive brain was addicted to novelty because new things could mean food, a mate, or a predator. Being curious kept you alive. That's why you feel that involuntary itch when your phone vibrates, that urgent need to check what's happening. It's not a lack of self-control. It's a 300,000-year-old instinct being exploited by algorithms created in Stanford laboratories. Each notification is designed to mimic the sound of a branch snapping in the forest, something that could be an opportunity or a threat, but definitely deserves your immediate attention. And here's the perverse genius. They've discovered that you don't always need to be rewarded to become addicted. In fact, unpredictable rewards are more addictive than guaranteed rewards. That's why you can spend hours scrolling through your feed and find only 3 things that are really interesting, but still keep going. Your brain is operating on the same system that makes rats press a lever 1,000 times for a chance to get food. You think you're choosing to consume entertainment. In fact, you're being consumed by a system that has turned your attention into the most valuable commodity on the planet. But dopamine is just the fuel. The real engine of this machine is something much more sophisticated. The engineering of artificial desire. Do you know why you feel hungry when you see a food commercial even after you've had lunch? Why do you feel horny watching porn even though you have an active sex life? Why do you feel the need to buy things you didn't even know existed? Because they've learned to create needs that don't naturally exist. In nature, desire arises from real need. You are thirsty, you seek water. You are hungry, you seek food. You feel the need for connection, you seek your tribe. Simple, straightforward, with a beginning, middle, and end. Artificial desire works differently. It does not arise from a real need, but from a manufactured comparison. You didn't need those sneakers until you saw someone wearing them. You didn't miss that experience until you were bombarded with images of it. Modern marketing doesn't sell products. It sells inadequacy. First, they convince you that you're incomplete, then they sell you completeness. And the diabolical beauty of the system is that it never delivers what it promises. Because if it did, you would stop consuming. Think about the last time you bought something because it would make you happy. How long did that happiness last? Probably the time between taking it out of the box and realizing that you were still the same person, with the same problems, only now with less money in your account. But of course, you didn't stop buying. Because next time, the product was different. The promise was more real. The advertising was more convincing. What you didn't realize is that you were being conditioned to associate inadequacy with shopping opportunities, to feel empty, and immediately look for something external to fill that void. And this doesn't just happen with physical products. It happens with experiences, relationships, even identities. You consume personalities on social media as if they were clothes, testing which version of yourself generates the most validation. You consume relationships as entertainment, discarding people the moment they stop stimulating your dopamine. You even consume your own emotions, documenting every feeling as if it were content to be consumed by others. And most disturbing of all, you do all this thinking you are exercising your individual freedom. But let me ask you something. If you are so free, why are your choices so predictable? Why do you and millions of other people do exactly the same things at the same time? For the same reasons. Why does everyone pick up their cell phone when they wake up? Why does everyone feel the same need to take pictures of their food? Why does everyone have the same political discussions based on the same arguments they see in the same places? Freedom of choice is an illusion when the options have been pre-selected by those who profit from your decisions. And that brings us to the darkest point in this story. You are not just consumers of this matrix of artificial pleasure. You are the products. And the buyers are others who profit from your predictability. Now, I'm going to show you something that could destroy your sense of autonomy forever. You are not a free individual making personal choices. You are a behavioral pattern walking on two legs. And what's even scarier, this is not only intentional, it's exactly the type of citizen the system needs to function. Think about it. What is the profile of the ideal consumer? Someone who works hard to buy things they don't need, with money they don't have, to impress people they don't know, buying products that promise happiness that never comes. Someone who is always slightly dissatisfied. Satisfied enough not to revolt, dissatisfied enough to keep consuming. Someone who confuses opinion with personality, products with identity, stimuli with experiences. Someone who is predictable enough to be manipulated, but feels unique enough not to notice the manipulation. Do you see where this is going? People addicted to pleasure are the perfect citizens of modern society. Not because they are happy, but because they are controllable. You see, someone who doesn't need constant stimulation is dangerous to a system based on selling stimulation. Someone who can be quiet with themselves may start to question why they need to work 8 hours a day to buy things they will use for 5 minutes. Someone who isn't addicted to digital dopamine may have the free time to notice that they live in a society where some people work 70 hours a week, while others don't need to work a single day. That's why it's essential that you never stop to think. That's why every second of your life needs to be filled with something. Music in your headphones, a show on your screen, food in your mouth, notifications on your phone. It is no coincidence that the people most critical of the system are those who have learned to tolerate boredom, to meditate, to be alone with their thoughts. Because when you stop running away from yourself, you begin to realize that you are running away. And what you discover is not pretty. You discover that you work at something that doesn't matter, buy things you don't need, interact with people who don't know you, and live a life you didn't consciously choose. But most importantly, you discover that this was no accident. It was design. The society you grew up believing to be normal was carefully constructed to turn your dissatisfaction into economic fuel, your anxiety into clicks, your loneliness into screen time, your emptiness into sales opportunities. You're not depressed for no reason. You're not anxious for no reason. You don't feel empty by chance. You're having a healthy reaction to a sick environment. But instead of questioning the environment, you have been taught to medicate the reaction. Antidepressants for the sadness of living a life without purpose. Anxiolytics for the anguish of always chasing things that don't matter. Sleeping pills because your mind won't stop processing useless stimuli. And most cruelly, even the cure has become a consumer product. Self-help books that promise happiness in 10 steps. Coaches who sell personal achievements as if they were hamburgers. Therapists who help you adapt better to the system instead of questioning whether the system is wrong. Spirituality transformed into a brand. Mindfulness sold as an app. Even the search for authenticity has become a performance on social media. You live in an era where even rebellion has been co-opted by the market. Want to be different? Buy this outfit. Want to be authentic? Follow this influencer. Want to wake up? Buy this course. And the result is an entire generation of people who feel unique consuming exactly the same things, who feel free making exactly the same choices, who feel awakened following exactly the same gurus. A generation that confuses rebellion with style, resistance with brand, revolution with hashtag. But here's what they didn't tell you. True freedom cannot be bought. True authenticity is not followed. True awakening is not consumed. True awakening happens when you stop needing to consume experiences to feel alive. When you can sit in silence and discover that you don't need anything external to be complete. When you realize that happiness is not a state to be achieved through acquisitions, but a capacity to be developed through presence. And that's when you become really dangerous to a system based on your perpetual dissatisfaction. Because someone who doesn't need to buy things to feel good doesn't feed the machine. Someone who doesn't need to distract themselves to tolerate their own company doesn't consume entertainment compulsively. Someone who has found peace in silence doesn't need the constant noise that keeps everyone too busy to question. And when people like that start to multiply, the whole system is at risk. That's why they do everything they can to prevent that from happening. That's why silence has become intolerable, loneliness has become a disease, boredom has become an emergency. That's why you've been conditioned since childhood to believe that stopping is wasting time, that doing nothing is being unproductive, that being alone is being antisocial. But what if I told you that it's exactly the opposite? That true productivity comes from silence, true socialization comes from connecting with yourself, and true life begins when you stop trying to fill it with things. Now we've reached the point where everything is turned upside down, where the very thing you were taught to fear becomes your liberation. Silence. I'm not talking about silence as the absence of sound. I'm talking about silence as total presence. The ability to be completely where you are, when you are, without needing to be anywhere else. And that, my friend, is the most radical act of rebellion there is today. Because in a society that profits from your distraction, mindfulness is economic sabotage. In an age that monetizes your anxiety, inner peace is political resistance. In a culture that sells inadequacy, self-acceptance is personal revolution. But how do you get there without becoming a frustrated monk in the middle of the modern world? How do you break decades of neural conditioning without turning into a bitter Puritan? The answer lies in understanding a distinction that can change your life: the difference between mindful pleasure and compulsive pleasure. Compulsive pleasure is when you don't choose pleasure, it chooses you. When the urge arises and you automatically obey without questioning where it came from or where it's taking you. Conscious pleasure is when you pause between the impulse and the action. When you feel the urge arise and ask, where is this coming from? What do I really need right now? It's not about denying your desires, it's about regaining your authority over them. Let me give you a practical example. You're at home, you feel that familiar restlessness, you automatically reach for your phone. Normal pattern, right? Now imagine doing something different. Feel the restlessness, notice the urge to pick up your phone, and instead of obeying immediately, pause. Just 5 seconds. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid feeling right now? That 5-second pause is where your freedom lives. Because in it, you discover something revolutionary. You are not your impulses. You are the one observing the impulses. And when you become the observer instead of the slave, everything changes. You begin to realize that most of your desires are not yours. They are automatic responses to stimuli that other people have programmed into you. You begin to notice that behind every compulsion, there is an emotion you are trying to avoid. And that this emotion, when felt completely, has something important to teach you. You discover that boredom is not emptiness. It is creative potential waiting to be explored. That loneliness is not abandonment. It is an opportunity to finally get to know who you really are when you are not performing for others. That anxiety is not just nervousness. It is vital energy that can be channeled into creation instead of consumption. This process doesn't happen overnight. You've been conditioned for decades to run away from yourself. You're not going to reverse that in a week, but every time you choose to feel, instead of run away, you're rewriting your neurology. Every time you tolerate discomfort without immediately medicating it, you're building emotional muscles. And slowly, something magical happens. You stop being afraid of silence. You stop panicking when you have nothing to do. You stop feeling like you need to consume something every moment to validate your existence. You discover that you can simply be, and being is enough. When that happens, you become dangerous to every system based on your dissatisfaction. Because someone who is at peace with themselves doesn't need to buy peace. Someone who feels complete doesn't need to consume completeness. You stop being a market and become a person. You stop being a consumption pattern and become a center of consciousness. And then the people around you start to notice. They see that you've changed, but they can't explain how. You speak more slowly, laugh less forced, but when you laugh, it's deeper. You seem more present. They ask you what happened, and you smile because you know you can't explain it in words. How do you explain that you stopped running away from yourself? How do you describe the freedom of not needing anything external to feel whole? Jung was right from the start. What you wanted most, constant pleasure, permanent escape from pain, was exactly what was preventing you from healing. Because healing is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to feel everything completely without having to run away from anything. Happiness is not having all your desires satisfied. It is not being a slave to your desires. Freedom is not being able to do everything you want. It is not needing to do anything to feel free. You spent your whole life chasing pleasures that promised to fulfill you and discovered that they only increase the emptiness. Now you know why. Because you were trying to fill a hole that could only be healed from within. The emptiness you felt was not a lack of something. It was an excess of escape. The anxiety that tormented you was not a chemical imbalance. It was an existential imbalance. The depression that consumed you was not a mental illness. It was the healthy reaction of a soul that knew you were living a life that was not yours. And now, finally, you can stop trying to fix the symptoms and heal the cause. You can stop being chosen by your pleasures and start choosing them consciously. You can stop being consumed by life and start living it. You can stop running away from who you are and start discovering who you can become. Because in the end, the only difference between a free person and a trapped person is not what they have access to. It's what they need to feel complete. And you, right now, don't need anything more than what you already are. This is the cure through presence. This is the revolution that happens in silence. This is the freedom that no one can sell you, because no one can take it away from you. You will never look at pleasure the same way again. Not because it's bad, but because now you see its true function. Not to fill voids, but to celebrate fullness. And when you celebrate your own completeness, the whole world changes. Not because the world has changed, because you have finally awakened.
If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You're subscribed to the channel, you watch the videos, you reflect on every idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to take this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit Codes is ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.